All right, it's recording.
All right, hi, I'm Matt Dillahunty from the Atheist Experience. This is going to be a special edition of the Atheist Experience show because we're having problems in the studio. And because of that, I wanted to take a few moments. We're just doing this with a single camera recording with the onboard microphone, so the sound quality is not going to be very good. We know that. This is also going to be kind of a long video because I'm going to go through a lot of the technical details related to the show because we get emails from people basically say, I don't understand why you have all the technical difficulties. Your show's unwatchable, it's unlistenable. And that's true, it is on occasion unwatchable and unlistenable. But we're not oblivious. We know that there are issues. We also know what those issues are. So the short version for why we're not having a show today is that our internet service is essentially down. At the building, the best internet that we can get is 200 meg down and 20 meg up. For a while, we were actually getting that. Over this past week, every bandwidth test is showing roughly 2 megs down on average, and the upstream speed is maybe 8 to 9 megs. So there's a lot of technical information. If you don't care about that, then all you need to know is our internet's down today. We're having a repair team come over tomorrow to try to fix it, and we'll be back up and running. But there's also been a lot of improvements to the show, and I thought that what I'd do is start by talking about the past when we were in the public access studio, then talk about the move to here, and then talk about what the future is, and we'll take it to camera in the other room, in the control room, and show what the actual setup is. Because a lot of people don't know what all is involved in actually producing a show like this. For example, I'm sitting here in the studio where the hosts would normally sit, and what we have are 3 cameras that need to be controlled independently. Those are piping the video into the other room, which we'll get to. We have a small monitor there that allows us to see what's actually being broadcast so that you can tell when you're on camera and when you're not. Maybe you need to pick your nose or take a drink, or I want the camera to be on the co-host so that I can mute my microphone and cough, unmute my microphone, because you want to not cough while you're on camera if you can avoid it. You prefer not to maybe pick your nose or whatever while you're there. So there's 3 cameras set up. Then we have a laptop that's set up for the call screening app so that we can see which callers are on there. We now have upgraded to a Comrex Stack VIP phone system. Up until this week, we were only taking calls via Skype. And that's because we were researching the phone system. And it's now set up. I got a handset here, but we'll go through that. So let me start with the past. This TV show started 18 years ago at the public access studio, and it wasn't live. It was just recordings of talks and conversations, and then that got posted. Eventually we went live, and eventually we started streaming from the public access studio even before the public access studio had that support. We basically brought in our own laptop, connected to their internet, and then streamed to Ustream and several other services. Public access is essentially a government-provided television station that is only for a local area. It's not broadcast, so it's not under FCC regulations, so that you can say offensive words. You can show nudity, provided you're not actually showing erect penises and penetration. And it became kind of like, think Wayne's World. That was them pretending to do a public access TV show. Anybody could come in, record what they wanted, do it in their basement, post it up there. You could go into the studio and do it live. Here's the problem. Public access studio is public, and it's open to everybody. All you have to do is get a producer's license, go through and qualify, and pay your producer's fees, and you can create a show. That means that the studio that we used on Sunday afternoons, or earlier on, it was Sunday mornings, the rest of the week was in use by other people. And they would mess with the equipment to set the equipment up for their show. Some of them would know what they're doing, some of them wouldn't. So every week, if the show was going to start at 4:30, we'd get there at 3:30. And we'd go into the studio, and we would have to reconfigure all of the lights because our particular lighting setup is different from other people's. So we'd have to set up all of the lights and the light board, set up all of the cameras, which may or may not be working, which may or may not be white balanced, which may or may not be the same cameras that you used the previous week. Eventually they upgraded to HD. So that's what's taking place in the studio. You've also got to set up the tables and the chairs and the blue screen or green screen if that's what you're using. That's on the studio side. In the control room, we had additional problems because there's a lot of complexity and you could do a great many things. It was a proper television studio. Unfortunately, some of the equipment was 20, 30 years old or more. Now, they did do $1 million upgrade on the public access studio in Austin, but one of the things that they didn't really upgrade was the audio equipment, the mixer. There weren't enough discrete inputs so that you could send, basically, in order to take a telephone call, you need all of the content of the mics and anything you want to send to the caller to hear while they're on the phone to go to one out. Then you want the entire show to go to another out so that they hear something when they're on hold. Then what's coming in from the caller needs to be able to go out to the main mix, and it also needs to go to the studio monitor so the hosts can hear. Now, in the public access studio, we had a speaker way up high on the wall, and that's how we heard calls. The problem with that, of course, is that this audio gets picked up by the microphones that you have if it's not far enough away. If I can hear it, the microphone can hear it. So there's always going to be a potential feedback loop at the public access studio, even when you're properly running what's known as a mix-minus setup. A mix-minus setup is something essential for call-in shows, where what you send to the caller is your main mix minus their voice. And so even if you've sent their voice out on an aux channel or to a separate sub bus, if you've got a speaker and it's being picked up by the microphone, they're still getting it back. That was part of the problem with Public Access Studio. Also, the various gain controls were constantly being manipulated. There was a Telos digital telephone hybrid, which is what you needed to take telephone calls over standard POTS lines, the standard handset lines that people used to have. And I suppose somebody still does, but while we were testing this, we discovered that none of us do, so we couldn't test it over a landline. And also, those have gain potentiometers that require a jeweler screwdriver, which for some reason the Public Access Studio didn't have, so we had to bring our own, because people would go in and tweak those. And if you don't have the right level set for the call, you can't hear interruptions either way, and this is where a lot of the talking over each other took place, even if you put them on hold. Because if your levels aren't set correctly, what you're sending them on hold will still override. And then we entered the era of cell phones. And cell phones are notoriously bad at full duplex, meaning their voice and your voice going back and forth simultaneously. There's an inherent delay. And all of this made the Public Access Studio painful. And when you add to that, that all of this setup has to happen every week, and it's always going to be a little bit different depending on who used it. And you have no control over the equipment. There's limited, you have limited ability to bring in some of your own equipment, which is how we added the laptop to be able to do the stream, and we used our own microphones and plugged into their jacks so we could get better quality microphones than they had. So every week you came in and you were pretty much starting from scratch, trying to set up a studio. Some weeks you get lucky and not much had changed. Some weeks you would get unlucky and everything had changed. And some weeks you would get even more unlucky and something would be broken. And when something's broken, the TV show suffers. It's not that there were a bunch of clueless people involved in our show. It's that it's a ton of work. And unless you absolutely understand, like could draw all the block diagrams for how we're actually setting up the studio, it makes it very difficult to troubleshoot it. And when you only got an hour, roughly, before your show to set everything up and troubleshoot problems, you're going to have problems. For a while we did the show from my couch while the studio was undergoing renovations, and it was a much simpler setup. One camera, one PC that was basically grabbing Skype calls, and it worked, but it was guerrilla TV. It wasn't professional. And also, we had good internet access at my house, so we were able to take calls and stream. We then set up and moved to this building. This is the ACA Free Thought Library that we bought a few years ago. It's actually a proper library. It's open on Fridays and Saturdays. And if you're in Austin, you're welcome to come by. We have books and media, but also there's room here for the studio, and then we use the office as a control room. We lost a producer for the public access station, and the station changed hands, and we weren't sure about what was going to change, and we decided now is the time for us to jump over to our building. And when we did so, we tried to make sure that we told everybody, please be patient, because we have to build all of the elements of a TV studio almost from scratch here. And the goal is to do it right so that we don't have the problems with the calls that we had. What that means is a strategic gradual implementation. So I came over and I spent a week building up the computer, that is the video processing computer. Essentially, it's a high-end Intel i7 with tons of RAM and hard drive space, and it has two Blackmagic Intensity Pro video capture cards to be able to capture the mics, or the cameras. Now, what you might realize is that I said we had 3 cameras and 2 capture cards. We didn't want to get a third capture card because that's going to tax the system, and there was another solution which we'll get to when we look in the other room. But that machine had to be built up, and then we had to install Wirecast and learn how to use Wirecast and set up all of the lower thirds and the minimum graphics that we need to be able to do some kind of show. Then we had to take the microphones that we were using, hook them up to a mixer in a proper mix-minus setup for Skype calls, and in a mix-minus setup to the video machine, so that the entire content, we could play videos from the video machine and that audio would get put into the main mix but wouldn't necessarily feed back in a loop. It's a complicated block diagram. And so the plan was get a single camera, 2 mics, and phone system. That was the early weeks. Then we upgraded to 3 cameras. So now we're using both of the video capture cards and an HDMI splitter, which we'll see when we go in the other room. Then it was get the lights set up appropriately. Right now I'm just using the overhead lights, so it probably looks a little glary. But we also have LED light stands in here. The next thing that needed to happen was we needed to worry about sound. The sound quality of mics in this room. This room is pretty much a tiny square. About 2 feet, 3 feet behind the camera is a wall that is glass. In the other room there are chairs so the studio can watch in through the glass. This is one of the reasons we thought this would be a great studio space. And anybody who knows anything about audio knows that you need to worry about sound reflection. So what's actually happening is the book configurations on the bookshelves help with sound reflection dampening. We also have acoustic foam strategically placed at different areas, and we have green screen fabric covering up some of the bookcases. Here's a piece of it on the bookcases to my left, so that you get an irregular shape so that we're not bouncing sound around too much. Problem is, there's that glass in front of me, and so there's always the direct reflection. The cameras block some of that. There's acoustic foam down there for part of it. There's no way to completely get rid of that. But I don't think that the audio quality from our mics going into the mixer is a massive problem as far as being able to hear and understand. It's not like we're producing an album. You just need clarity. You need to be able to understand what we're saying. So we're getting close to being done with the audio stuff in here. There's a few tweaks left to do. We're going to put baffling across the ceiling, and I think that we're going to actually put a baffling across the top of the glass so that there's still a window to view, but the reflections aren't as bad. So that takes care of the audio portion in this room. The next step was to make sure that we could upgrade to a proper phone system. Now, we didn't want to use a landline for a number of reasons, but we wanted a system that could accept a landline telephone and voice over IP from just standard voice over IP that you would use for phone service with an actual phone number, and a system that would allow someone from their laptop to basically call the Atheist Experience and use the sound equipment on their laptop, on their cell phone, on their whatever system they've got that has a browser open to communicate directly to the show. That involves a lot of research to make sure that you've actually got the right thing. And they're not cheap. So the discrete audio channels that are coming from here, you basically need a full-on professional phone system. That's what we have. It arrived and we configured it this week. This is when we figured out that part of the problem with last week's show and several others where we had issues with Skype or with streaming were because our internet bandwidth is doing this. It's all over the place, but the average for our 200 meg down, 20 meg up service today and yesterday was about 2 megs on average, which means you get spikes up to about 167, but most of your time is spent well below 2 to get that average at 2. Essentially, we have no internet service that is usable at the building today. There's a service technician coming over tomorrow because it used to work. We used to get 220 as soon as they installed it. And we've replaced the cable modem. The problem still exists, even after, we properly provisioned it. So now we know that the problem is not on our end. The internet problem is from our modem to the provider. We don't know what the solution is going to be. I'll find out more about that tomorrow. Now, this phone system that we decided on, I'll take you through some of the features. It's amazing. It is a full-on professional solution that is designed for call-in shows. Some of the people who would email us and say, oh, I don't understand, why is this so hard? That's right, you don't understand. This isn't a Google Hangout thing, which is easy. You can do that on your phone. No equipment. I'm just going to do a Google Hangout. We turn that into a podcast. It's a live show, which has a lot of issues when things are live. If your internet service goes down or has poor performance, your live show suffers. When you're taking all of your calls from Skype or voice over IP, that's internet. And you're using the internet to stream. So as soon as the internet goes down, there is no live show. And that will always be the case. The best solution, if the internet goes down, is that our phone system can still take a single landline POTS, standard POTS system telephone, and we would be able to take phone calls on that number and record the show and then post it afterwards. But there'd be no live show and there'd be no voice over IP. So now we're here. We're in the building. What took us so long to get the phone system that we were gonna start using today, and then the internet went down, but it'll start up next week. It's already been tested and works. What took so long? Well, there's a lot of research to make sure that we weren't making a mistake. If we are building our own studio here, we want to make sure that we do it right, because the end goal is to get to a point where we no longer have, oh, the audio quality is terrible, or this caller got dropped, or people couldn't hear each other. There's no way to make that entirely go away. Listen to a call-in radio show sometime. Sometimes the calls are tinny and crap, and that's because in addition to your equipment, you have to deal with the people who are calling in. Are they calling in on a cell phone? Is it a good cell phone with a good microphone? What's their service provider? Are they having problems with their service? How many times have you been on a cell phone and, oh, I can't hear you right now, or it got crackly even though it's supposed to be a digital connection? It's just not making any sense. Those are problems we can't fix. I can't buy a phone for everybody, and I can't make the cell phone networks have perfect quality audio. But the goal was to make sure that nothing on our end is causing problems. And right now, nothing on our end is actually causing problems. It's an internet thing. But why did it take so long to get this? Because once we decided on the phone system, we realized these things aren't cheap. This Comrex Stack VIP system costs a little less than $5,000 for the hardware. That is the machine you'll see in there, the monitoring handset for out here, and the monitoring handset in the other room for the call screener, which is something else that people forget. It's not like I'm just, hey, welcome to the Atheist Experience, so who are you? That happens in the other room. This is a full setup for call screening. So after figuring out what it was and how much it would cost, we then had to figure out the additional costs, because this service, it's hardware and a service. And the service has a monthly expense associated with it. It's like $45 a month, I think, just to be able to take calls at all. And then you have a separate voice over IP provider that handles your telephone number and all the calls coming in, and they have a per minute charge. Now what that means is that if we do the show 4 weekends in a row for the month, only 4 weeks in a month, and we took the 5th week off, that each of those shows, if it's an hour, that's 60 minutes, that we have to pay per minute charges for, in addition to this, to the support for the telephone system itself. If we do a 90-minute show, which is what we want to do, I think 90 minutes is perfect. I think an hour is just slightly too short, and 2 hours is too long. So our plan is to go back to 90 minutes. I know some people will be very happy about that. I certainly am. But that means now you're paying for 90 minutes of calls. And it's 90 minutes per caller. We have 6 phone lines. For some reason I couldn't make 6 with my fingers. 6. We have 6 phone lines. So you're paying, if all of them are full, for an entire show, every single week, that's 4 sections times 6 is 24 times 90 minutes if we were to hold. So we had to budget for what the max the show is going to cost. So we went from doing a public access TV show where we had producer fees of like $100 for 6 months to doing the show in our building where we have electricity to pay for, internet service, which by the way, our internet service isn't like what you get at home, which is why I'm going to complain very strongly to them tomorrow. This is a building in its own corporate, and we're a corporate entity, which means we pay the corporate rate. So while at home I have gigabit down and up for, you know, 100 and something a month, we're paying, I think, nearly $300 a month to get 200 down, 20 up. So for moderate internet service at the building, we're paying more than double what I pay at home because we have to pay the corporate rate. Then there's the per minute costs. I've already mentioned power, you know, standard maintenance on the building. We had to figure out what the total cost of the show was going to be. And then you have to go to the board of directors for the Atheist Community of Austin, who owns the building and is the sponsor of this show, and say, here's what we want to buy, and here's how much it's going to cost, and here's why we actually need it. Now, fortunately, our board is amazing, and our board understands that this is the flagship operation of the atheist community, and that the most important thing is to get good quality calls. I could have a flat image, and as long as I'm able to take calls, that's the main substantive content that we're trying to get out. Nobody needs to look at me. I know some of you really do, and I appreciate it, and some of you don't. Bite me. But the board agreed that that was important, and that's what we're going to do. So we got approval for the funds. That means then we had to order the equipment, wait for it to arrive. And as it turned out, what they sent us was the wrong device. Not going to point blame anywhere. It was a mistake. That device had to be sent back, and we had to wait for the new device. But we also agreed as a contingency from the board that we would not connect this $5,000 phone system until the building security had been installed and upgraded so that we could make sure that all of our equipment was protected. So the phones, while we were waiting for the phone system to arrive, we set up a security system here. It's top of the line, motion detectors, cameras, and monitors everything, and uploads it all to the cloud. It's top notch. And then we were able to set up the phone system, and that's when we discovered that we're having problems with the internet. Basically, we rewired everything, and the mixer, which I'll show you in a minute, the mixer we used to use had a short in it, which was part of the audio problems that we'd had previously. So I bought a new mixer for the ACA. It's really nice, and it's not crazy expensive. And we had to wire everything, and if you don't know how to set it up for Mix Minus, you have to learn that. Fortunately, I was here and I had done it before. So we got all that set up for the audio. And that's when we said, wow, we just paid a ton of money for this voice over IP, and the call quality is really, really bad. So we spent most of the time troubleshooting what was on the board and making sure we're getting a clear 1K tone that sounds amazing from there for the test to set up the pre-fade level gains. And yet when we make a call, it was terrible. And we worked all day. And then about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, we tried another call to test out something else. We were getting an echo. And the call quality is amazing. And that's when it clicked on my head. This is internet-based. Essentially, during the day, we were having problems. And I thought it was about bandwidth usage. And I thought, oh, everybody just went home, and they're not quite Netflixing yet. So we've got this window in the evening where we're the only ones using this bandwidth. And that's when we get good quality calls, and we're able to stream. And that's what I suspected the problem was. So when I showed up here today, we were going to do a mock version of the show to test that out. It turns out I was right that the problem was the internet. It has nothing to do, though, with potential shared bandwidth or conflict with other businesses. There's an actual technical problem. There are moments where we get good bandwidth, and there are moments where the signal is bouncing back, and it's not the modem itself. We bought a new modem and tried it out. Anyway, they'll be coming tomorrow to service that. After all that's set up, what we'll have is a 3-camera live streaming show that's able to take telephone calls, voice over IP, to a specific number. Eventually, we will add a hard line, probably, if it turns out we need it. But if we have internet troubles, the show goes down. We have a headphone splitter in here And we had tried to set up a speaker in this room last week. And that speaker was being piped directly from one machine, the Skype machine, which had a YouTube video playing it in the background, and you couldn't hear it until the speaker was turned on, because that's the only time you get audio from that machine. And that was one of the problems from last week's. There were a few others. One thing that we discovered 2 days ago in testing is that the lavalier mics that we use in here, when they're connected, shockingly, even with earbuds going into your ear at a moderately low volume, this mic was still sensitive enough to pick it up. So I'm going through and adjusting the gain on all the microphones to see if we can correct for that a little bit. But we will have to use earbuds because the speaker thing is always going to set up a loop. And even the earbuds were creating a potential loop, although it is only going to be heard by the caller and won't end up in the final product. And it is a faint enough echo that it's not distracting while you're on the phone. So even if we don't find a solution to that, we'll still be able to do calls, and what you'll hear on your end, streaming, and in the final recorded product, will be fine. The only nuisance will be a slight, faint, delayed version of your own voice, which is at such a low level that you can pretty much ignore it. But we are working on that solution too. So for the people who think, what's wrong with you guys? You just don't know what's going on. We're aware of the problems. If you think you were frustrated, imagine how we feel. This is an entirely volunteer effort. None of us get paid to do this show. We've devoted our lives to it. I've been hosting for almost 11 years now, and the show's been on for about 18, give or take. People come in, offer their time. The people in the booth that are doing all the control stuff, they're not getting paid, and they're not experts. We've had to learn things and teach them. But I think the people who know the system will, first of all, know how complicated this is. They'll also understand that, yes, as you're learning this stuff, and when this happens, your natural instinct is to troubleshoot it this direction when you probably should have gone this way. And that's something you only learn by actually fixing the problem. We've had professional audio engineers come in and work with us in the past at the other studio. And I plan to have at least one, if not two, professional audio engineers come in once everything's set up and double check to make sure that the levels on all the mics and equipment are set correctly, not just for recording, but to also potentially fix the earbud lavalier mic problem. So I'm going to take the camera into the studio and show a little bit of the setup that we have in there, some of the equipment, how it's all done. But hopefully most of this will clear up the confusion. If you've never tried to do a live call-in show that includes call screening and the mix-minus setups to make sure that the callers aren't hearing themselves, and that, by the way, some of the hosts like to hear their own voice. I do. Some of them, like Russell, do not. So these mics here need to be variable as to whether or not they're sent back into your earbuds. So let's go in the other room and take a look at the equipment in there. But if you're not that interested in the equipment and you made it through that entire explanation, thank you. And I appreciate the patience and understanding from people. And while I'm a little irritated at people who come off as entitled, complaining about a show they get for free when they know nothing about the complexities of putting it together, that's very irritating. But I also want to say that I understand it. Even if there are people who send in emails that were like, oh my God, you guys are fucking idiots. And I would just smack the crap out of them in an email back. Look, you entitled jackass, you have no idea what's going on. Fuck off and make your own show type thing. I do, though, understand the frustration. Here's a show that you like, and you'd love to listen to it, and you wish that it was high quality. Not just for you, but because this is going out to a broader audience, and why wouldn't we want the best quality? The only time it was especially irritating was when they implied that we either were too stupid, too lazy, or too disinterested to actually fix the problems. This is an amazing crew of people with a variety of expertises who are donating their time. I'm just the guy who talks. Well, okay, I've helped with the setup, but when the show's actually live, I'm here to talk. And I don't appreciate the team that is working hard and cares and is trying to fix the problems, and not just fix them to where they're, okay, it's good enough where I'm not going to complain, but get to a point where we have a high quality, high value production show that almost never has problems, or at least very rarely has problems that are on our end from our mistakes. We've now typed up a massive documentation of every feature of the show and pre-show checklists, and we can train people to come in and do this. So let's go take a look at our studio. All right, so here we are. This is going to be a fairly quick studio tour. The PC that you're looking at right now is the video processing machine. It has two Blackmagic Intensity Pro video capture cards in there so that we can get the inputs from the HDMI. It also has dual monitors so that on the bottom monitor we can have Wirecast loaded and be working it, and on the top monitor we can monitor anything else that we need on that machine, or notes, etc. The reason we have two video capture cards and three cameras instead of three video capture cards is that it would actually overload this machine to put a third one in there, and we're already basically to process all of the video and to stream it out, which this is the machine that it streams from because that's what Wirecast does. It's run into CPU issues, and this is a high-end i7, pretty much top of the line. But this little box right here is an HDMI video switcher. All three cameras are going into that, or sorry, two of the cameras are going into that video switcher on this side, and one of them is going out. So the main camera that focuses on both the host and the co-host goes directly into one of the video capture cards. And then the individual cameras that focus on either the host or the co-host go into this video splitter. This means we set up three cameras and we don't need a camera person at all. And that video switcher has a little IR device and this remote that allows you to switch between camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2, and the other switching takes place on this machine. Now, we have a cable modem which feeds a router which is going to feed both the video PC for streaming, the audio PC for Skype, which is what this machine over here is, and then it also feeds the voice over IP phone system through that gigabit switch right there. The voice over IP phone system is this beautiful Comrex which we just bought, Stack VIP system. And it has inputs so that we can send the audio we want the caller to hear, basically the host audio, or we can send the entire show to the hold audio so that they hear something when they're on hold. And then it's actually more robust than we need. You could do two separate shows from this device, feeding callers out to two shows independently at the same time using one box. That's what needs the voice over IP service. Now, this machine that's been the Skype machine is going to be the call screening machine. Here's one of the control consoles for the voice over IP system. The second control console is in the studio so that the host out there can answer line 1, line 2, line 3, all the way up to 6. And we have all 6 lines active. So whereas in the public access studio we had 3 or 4 at most, we now have 6. And this phone system includes a call screening app that will be visible in here and visible out in the studio, that allows you to see every caller, what their phone number is. We finally have caller ID capacity, which we never had in the public access studio. It allows you to prioritize the calls, etc., mark them as screened or not. Most of that's not too critical, but this machine will not only take voice over IP calls from our provider, we could plug a standard POTS phone service into it as well when we add a hard line. But the neat thing is that eventually, it's not up yet, when you go to the Atheist Experience webpage, there will be a link at the top of the page when we're live that allows you to click and call in from your computer. Essentially using the same type of service that Skype or Google Hangout does, where you've got your headphones and your mic set up at home. You're just calling through our version of Skype or Google Hangout. Or actually, it's not ours. It is the service provider that we're getting this from. It makes it nice and easy. You don't have to remember a phone number. You can just go to the website, click Call Atheist Experience, and you now show up as a caller on the call screening app. I'm not going to show you the call screening app today because we're still working on it, and the internet's down. This is the new mixer. the old mixer had a short in it, and so we bought this. It's a Behringer X2222 USB, although we're not using the USB, and it wouldn't actually work with our setup the way we want. But the first 4 channels are mics. They're all XLR mics. 2 of them are lavaliers. 1 of them is just a dynamic mic that's out there for nonprofits. There's room for a 4th one, which we're going to get a cardioid kind of round table mic so that you could do a group discussion with just a single microphone. All 4 of those channels have channel inserts on the back of the mixer. Those channel inserts come up here to our Multicom Pro XL 4-channel compressor limiter expander. This is how you make sure that if somebody starts yelling, they still don't go over 0 dB. And if somebody is quiet, we can in fact boost the gain a little bit. Basically, it's a super complex per channel equalizer that makes sure that your audio quality is about as good as you can get. We've been using that for years with the other mixer, but all 8 channels have inserts here. The first 4 will be mics with that. Then you have to adjust the gain individually at the pre-fade level for that during setup, and then hope that nobody touches it, which is why this says do not touch gain control, so that nobody accidentally bumps something that knocks off a mic. So there's the studio mics on those inputs. On channel 5, this is the control room mic, which is actually right over here. It's not going out to the main mix at all. It's only being sent out to the studio so that someone in here can talk to us, we can hear it, the caller can't hear it, it never gets included in the main mix, so it's not a part of anything that's going out on live stream or in the recording. Just a way for them to talk to us in the other room. Even though technically the other room's right around that corner, it does make things a lot easier. Line 7 is the phone system. This is what's coming in from the Comrex voice over IP thing, and it works. And we did a full-on 1 kilohertz tone test from that box to make sure that our levels are set. And that box also has within it a few options that we're going to experiment with. There's an automatic gain control, so that box can adjust callers' levels. Right now I've got it turned off because we were experiencing problems, but those problems might have been related to the internet. It also has a few other audio tweaks and features so that you get crisp audio coming into this channel. The next one is the Wirecast thing, so that if we wanted to play a video or the audio from something, we could play it on this machine and it still goes into the mixer. Throughout most of the show, this one is just going to be muted because we don't need audio from that machine and we don't need to create a feedback loop that goes to what we're recording or streaming. The next input is for the Skype machine so that we can do Skype calls, and that was actually configured so that the inputs are coming in right there, but the output that it's getting is, well, right now it's set up as the main out, but we can actually set it up so that it's getting one of the sub outs from the back so that it's a full mix minus setup, and that way there's no crosstalk. And so then we've still got these channels that are open. We're not using the built-in effects on the mixer, although we could, and I would imagine nonprofits might more than anything. You can just apply the effects filter and I don't know, sound like the stereotypical Satan, or you're doing a show in a hall or whatever. So that's pretty much it. There is this headphone switcher. This is taking the main out, and we've got 2 headphones plugged in so that the people working here at this station can hear the final output to make sure that nothing goes wrong with what we're streaming. Because if you're listening, let's say, to just the hosts, and the hosts aren't being sent to the main mix, your audio is dead on your stream and you're recording and you don't know it. So this is for monitoring the stream. That cable actually goes out. There's one that goes to a speaker, which is right up here, so that anybody who happens to be sitting in this room to watch the show would be able to hear it. It's unplugged. The other one goes out into that room. That is the front room of the library, which is where the studio audience sits and looks through the glass. The camera cable's not long enough for me to actually go out there and do it, and I think somebody's already shot a tour of the building. But there's a speaker out there so that the people watching the show can hear the show. And that's it. Without going through, you know, the complexities of the mix minus portion of the setup, that's what we're doing. We're using basically aux 1 and 3 to send the mics to aux 1. We send the phone to aux 3. We also send the mics to aux 1. and aux 1 goes out to the studio, or aux 1 goes to the phones and aux 3 goes to the studio. That's way more information than anybody ever needed or wanted. But on the off chance that we start to get emails from people saying, I don't understand what's going on, why isn't this easy, I've done a Google Hangout, whatever. We've built an entire internet-based television studio in here. There's still going to be a number of improvements and tweaks, but for the people who thought they knew what was going on and didn't, now they'll have that information. And for people who actually understand what's going on, if you have tips, if you have suggestions for improvements, we're still going to get an audio engineer to come in and double check this. It is in fact all working. We've already tested that it all works, apart from that one faint echo, which is a problem with the mics in the other room. But if people have better ways to do this that would be easier, that still support all the complexity that we need here, we're always happy to hear it. But if you're just going to email and say, what the hell's wrong with you guys, your show's unlistenable, and imply that we're stupid or lazy or we don't care, you have no idea what you're talking about. And my only response to those emails will be to point you to this video. And that's why I made sure it was nice and long, because those people who don't have patience with us also aren't going to have the patience to watch this video, and they can sit there and stew in their ignorance, and I will get on with the business with all of the wonderful people who make this show happen of doing an actual fucking show.